So we're recording it. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Let's give some time so everyone can join. It's great. And thank you for joining us. So let's give a minute or two, just so maybe 1 minute. So as people are joining, thank you for joining us. Hello, everyone. My name is Fatma Saidia. I'm the director of Well America. I am your host for this episode of Refugee Matters, a podcast series powered by Well America, where we explore the most pressing issues facing immigrant and refugee communities. This series help our realities, and we try to connect those to the broader public conversation that's happening in America. Today's episode, Broken Promises, come in a moment of very deep reflection and urgency in our country. For decades, even when immigrants were facing growing attacks um, from all sides, refugees were understood to hold a very unique promise that when they arrived in the United States, they would find safety and protection. The United States were their promised home, their forever home. That promise was never perfect. That reality was never perfect for many refugees. And especially in the past couple years, that promise start to erode, especially with policies like the Muslim ban, the African ban, and the big drop in the PD numbers. But today, with new ICE enforcement and the threat of deportation, it feels that that long decades of promise and commitment has fundamentally broken. This is not just a policy crisis, but it is a moral crisis for our country. So, what does that say about this moment, this time? What does that say about our country, the richest country has ever existed on this planet? And what does this moment ask of us? And I'm honored today to have that conversation with our amazing guest, Nicole Malaco, the Executive Director of National Partnership for New American, Neil Anderson, the National Field Director at Church World Services, and Pais Ali, a community leader, but also Portland, Maine City Councilor. And I would like to invite each one of them to ground us in this moment, but also talk about the amazing work they are doing. Let's start with Nicole.
Thank you so much, Fatima and Refugee Matters for hosting me today. As Fatima mentioned, my name is Nicole Malaku, my pronouns are she, her. I have the pleasure of also serving as the co-chair of the We Are All America Coalition. One of our main missions as NPNA is to really advance immigrant inclusion, and that means immigrants, refugees, formerly displaced people, including asylees, and making sure that people have on-ramps to their full integration in our society. One of the things that is particularly alarming about this time is the complete repeal of refugee resettlement and the destruction of an entire sector that really is about welcoming and building inclusion strategies for newcomers across the country. And so we at NPNA, from our perch of our advocacy purview and from the work that we do that spans across immigrant, refugee, and asylee issues, is really seeing these attacks as a much more sinister pattern that's emerging, an affront to our democracy in general. And I know we're going to get into that throughout the conversation and unpack that a little bit more. But what's grounding me is the fundamental belief that is inscribed on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty that has always been a part of our nation. And it's the sonnet written by Emma Lazarus that says her famous line inscribed on the Statue of Liberty are, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." That to me is the kind of nation I want to belong to. That's the kind of nation I want to be a part of building. And so I think everything that's happening right now is an affront to that, and an affront to every person who believes in dignity and opportunity for our fellow human beings. So I'll turn it over to our next speaker, who I believe is Noel.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Fatima. Thank you so much for your leadership and for inviting me to be part of this call. We Are All America has such a played in such an important role. I'm glad to have been on to be on the advisory committee. As mentioned, I'm the national field director for Church World Service, as well as the co-founder of the my denomination's United Church of Christ National Collaborative on Immigration, and serve as the co-chair for the Interfaith Immigration Coalition. So, I'm so glad that we're having this discussion today across, how is it that we are in solidarity across sectors, because we really need that as we build the movement together in collaboration and solidarity. We need one another. And for me, what has kept me grounded in these difficult days that we're going through is my faith. I really come to the work of immigrant justice through the lens of faith. I grew up. My dad was a Methodist pastor, and it was always in this values that we are to open the congregation for all people. And where I grew up, there was a lot of farm workers, a lot of kids of immigrants who became my first friends, who also welcomed me when I was often the new kid moving from town to town as I did growing up. And, when I went to Latin America and learned Spanish, I remember somebody challenging me, an elder, saying, "See, when you come here, you get so much hospitality from us," which is so true. I just experienced such a warmth of family, and she said, "We treat you like you're a family. Why is it that when we go to your country, we're treated so poorly?" And I think the way in which the discrimination against immigrants and refugees have has been on the rise is contradictory to Christian values and really all faith values, that we are to welcome the sojourner in our midst, that we are to reach out to and love our neighbor. That is our calling. And if we are not doing that, then there's something wrong. And those of us who are trying to follow our faith need to make sure that we are doing the bold witness, going out and joining people on the streets, lifting up the voice of those who are impacted, who are willing to speak, that is. And now we're seeing in the refugee community more and more recognition that ICE is also going after refugees and detaining refugees. And I'll talk about a little bit about that in the next questions. But we're seeing, that the same enforcement mechanisms that have been so targeted towards undocumented people over the years are now going after everybody of every immigration status. And we certainly do have, it is in a moment where we need to together rise. And I know we're going to continue to talk about that as we go forward. So I'll pass it to Pius.
Uh, can you hear me? Thank you very much. Thank you, Fatima, for inviting me. And it is nice to be on the same space with you, Nicole and Noel. My name is Pius Ali. I am an immigrant from Ghana, and I am a city councilor here in Portland, Maine, and mayor pro tem. During my daytime, I just founded an organization called African Elected Leaders in America, where I work with Ghanaian Americans who are in elected office and other Africans, so that we can support each other, especially now that immigrants of all kind are under attack. Um, when you look at the history of refugees, I think if I will get that right, I know that there's almost everyone here knows, but since the Refugee Act of 1980 was passed, we have had some quite successful, smooth transition of refugees that come here. If you look at the history of, or I can look here in Maine without going national, we have refugees from, I think it's Vietnam, and we have refugees from other Southeast Asian countries. And then recently, and they have done good. They are successful here in Maine. They have businesses. You can find them all over the city. But the past few years have been very unfortunate. because we have this wonderful program that have shown that it can be successful, and we have people that have lived in the community. They have become part of the community. Unfortunately, because of politics in the past few years, we could have a parent here, and then the child is somewhere halfway between somewhere and here, and then the other parent is back home in a refugee camp. That is not what we told the world that we are. That is not the type of responsibilities that we have taken, and we should be taking, because we are we are the wealthiest country in the world. And if we are the wealthiest country in the world, to whom much is given, much is expected. We cannot be going around the world and telling people what to do, and then when they turn in our gate, we're going to shut the door in front of them and tell them that you cannot come here. Historically, we all know that any country, it doesn't matter where it is, that shut the door to the stranger, see its advancement. How do you call it? The advancement of any country, the advancement of any country that shut the door, its door to the stranger, end up slowing down. And I think we have a tradition that we need to uphold, which is welcoming everybody that comes through our doors. Yes, I agree that we need to put in restrictions in terms of we have to vet everyone who is coming here. But my neighbors and my friends who have been in refugee camps before coming here tell me that, and I believe that they are the most vetted group of immigrants in our communities, because they have to go through this process at the camp, and then once they get here or in between, they have to go through many more process. So the argument that we need to vet them, or we need to make sure we know who is coming, it doesn't hold up, because we do know who is coming, because we vetted them before we invited them into the country. Fatima, I'm going to pass it on to you so that you can lead the conversation.
Absolutely. And it takes actually an average of 17 to 20 years for someone to be the pipeline and to be a refugee and resettle in a country, the United States. That's absolutely true. At this moment, I would like to ask Nicole, Nicole, in your experience, and it would be great to talk, because you have this bird's eye view. MPNE has members in almost 50 states, and you work very closely with a lot of these organizations and supporting them as they are facing this enforcement, whether it is in Minnesota, it started California and Louisiana, all of these places. So we would like to hear from you, and how do you connect in this ongoing attack that's now against refugees, to the broader anti-humanitarian protections, and also what's happening to the immigration overall, and how do we connect this to what's happening to our country?
Yeah, thank you so much, Fatima. I think from our bird's eye view, as you said, we can see the kind of the pulse of the whole country. With coming out of the 2024 election and this administration, this government really saying they were going to go after folks who were not authorized to be in the country, only to find out a short time after, maybe the first deployments of military across cities, that refugee and former asylees are also basically on task to be part of Trump's deportation regime. And so from what I can vantage is that this administration under the leadership of, the shadow president, Stephen Miller, is really focused on attacking legal pathways for migration. And so attacking refugee resettlement was one mechanism to make sure that he could siphon off in newcomers from joining us in this country, but then systematically building systems to be able to target individuals, question their vetting, pull them out of status in some cases, has been one of the tactics that we're seeing. And so we're seeing it all interconnected in the spectrum of people of different statuses across the country. It looks like, pulling people out of parole programs and ending those programs so that they therefore lose their work authorization and basically become undocumented and are then put into the deportation pipeline. It looks like pulling, in Operation Paris in Minneapolis, pulling people formerly vetted and longstanding residents out of their homes, out of their cars, accusing them of having acquired refugee status unlawfully or with errors, and trafficking them essentially to third-party locations to be able to re-vet their applications. And so legal service providers having to scramble to be able to file habeas petitions to get people out of detention and help halt their deportation. It looks like sending a memo for recent. DHS recently issued a memo as early as last week that authorizes DHS to go after refugees who have not acquired their green card in the last period of a year. And so those individuals will be somehow ensnared in the deportation type dragnet and basically moved to detention centers and rapidly deported from this country. And so we're seeing the attacks on many fronts. It wasn't only this agenda, this anti-immigrant, isolationist, extremist agenda wasn't only about the unauthorized migrant populations, but about any person of migrant diaspora. And so we're seeing that play out in real time. And if you connect the dots along the way of like, what is the footprint of the deportation centers that they are building, the private prisons across the country, the undocumented population alone could never fill those prisons. And I think as enforcement operations are playing out in the field across the country, they're realizing that maybe there's a way to detain people based on administrative procedures and infrastructures that currently exist for immigration benefits like USCIS. And so along with the refugee bans you spoke of earlier, Fatima, the bans, the third country bans, the indefinite pause of visas for people to reunite with their families in the United States. All of these are designed systematically to cull legal migration pathways under the current administration, and in doing so, attack longstanding community members to put them into the deportation pipeline. So that is what we're seeing. I think later I'll talk more about what our remedy is for that, but I'll pass it to one of our other speakers to maybe offer reflections on that as well.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I want to have a conversation with Newell, especially as you were talking, Newell, that you came to this work because of your faith. And I think, and we know that throughout the history of in the past 50 years of refugee resettlement, which has been really came out of America's grace, America's protection, but it has been really the churches, the synagogues, the church world services, one of the great example of that. But also, as I was this morning going through the list of the people that was invited, for example, to join Donald Trump tonight to the his State of Union, there was a long list of conservative, evangelical nationalists that are also there. And we are seeing that he's using the faith language in order to sometimes justify the harm that is happening and what is happening to refugees and immigrants. And I want to have this conversation with you and see your view on it, because of how do we bring back the grace, the compassion of Christianity back to the refugee resettlement, and especially in your work, and you have done, and you are very connected, well connected to the faith community when it comes to refugee resettlement.
Yeah, thank you. That's a difficult question to unpack. I'll do my best. I think the first part I want to say, you mentioned that the faith communities have been hugely influential over the last, 100 years in what we understand to become refugee resettlement today. And my organization's 80 years old, and I know HIAS is even older, I believe. And, we were there at the port in New York City, welcoming refugees from World War II, over 80 years ago now. And so I think, what came from the different iterations of the resettlement and Geneva Conventions and the 1980 Refugee Act very much was shaped by different religious traditions and the importance of co-sponsorship. Many congregations throughout different denominations participate in that, where they actually help the resettlement process. They help provide apartments and rent and helping people get on their feet, help them get to their doctor's appointments, register for school, etc., alongside case managers in our refugee resettlement agencies. And we've really seen also, in the last decade, with an influx of greater asylum seekers, faith communities really stepping up there and doing similar things with less funding to support asylum seekers in their process of resettlement. And so, I think that is a big part of the tradition, and something that is rooted in our sacred text, something that's part of where we come from, our experiences, and also, where our faith leads us to, really, if we're following those tenets. And I think that's where it gets difficult. I think when people try to have theological debates about whether or not we should be welcoming immigrants, there's really not much of a leg to stand on theologically or scripturally to support the idea that it's okay to be anti-immigrant. And I think that also cuts across faith traditions. But what we do see, I think, is the reality that scripture and faith can be distorted to really any type of political agenda or economic agenda that politicians or decision makers or people in power might have. And we've seen that over the years, right? We understand that in the civil rights movement, there were, of course, people utilizing scripture to try to defend Jim Crow, to defend the history of slavery. Yet at the same time, there were those fighting for liberation, fighting for equality and equity, and the civil rights, led by Dr. Martin Luther King, as well as many other pastors from many different traditions and even different faiths. And so we know that there will always be a contingent that wants to be with those who are powerful, and will essentially make excuses or find ways in their faith to join with empire. And we've seen that throughout the ages, whether we're talking about Christianity and Constantine going way back to the 4th century, when Christianity really first joined with the Roman Empire. But really, the roots of Christianity was of the oppressed people, of a people oppressed by the Romans, a smaller country that, and there's a reason that Jesus was killed when he did his prophetic witness and stood up to empire. So I think, from my perspective, if we're really following, so the synoptic gospels, that we're following the scripture that tells us to love our neighbors, then it is really difficult to come up with an argument for oppression and injustice.
Absolutely agree. And it feels like, even if I am not a Christian, it feels like some parts of it is being hijacked, like any other religion, for people to justify the brutality that they are already planning. So, Pius, this is a great part of conversation, the segment to your conversation. You and I are both Mainers. We are very proud Mainers. We love our state, and we think that it is the best state in America. But it's also a very white state. And I say that because of what's happening to the refugees and what's happening to the refugee resettlement. When we talk there is an attack on refugee, that's not the whole story. And that's because we are welcoming, or people are still allowed, and there is a rising number of conversations happening for white South Africans to become refugees. So the reason let's connect this to what's happening in Maine, in a state like Maine, that when there was the catch of the day started, so there was a huge group of ICE came to Maine to attack mostly Somalis and mostly Senegalese and mostly Sudanese, or the group of African refugees that has resettled here over the year, Congolese and Angolans. But our white allies showed up, and there was a huge backlash. So, how does the rest of America, when you think about Maine, 60, I think that 96% is white. So, but how do we take that, what happened in Maine, to take it to the rest of America and say that the attack that is happening on refugees and immigrants is attack on the whole American? It's an attack on our rights, it's an attack on our constitution, it's an attack on everyone. So how do we take that knowledge and to talk to the rest of America about allyship and what does make a good allies?
Well, thank you very much. Men have always been unique, even during the civil rights, even the pre-civil rights days, during slave abolition days. Men have always been a pathway where slaves who were running away from the South find refuge. We have the oldest African meeting house in the country right here in Maine. It's still standing. It's an old church, and but the building is still there, and that we are trying to work and bring it back to life. What is unique and what Mainers understand is that, in addition to the kindness and the welcoming nature of Maine, the people of Maine also understand that this whole thing is not just about are we welcoming someone, how different do they look? It is about the workforce growth in a state, in a country that is aging. We all know that America is not making any more babies like we used to do, which shows the decline in our economic growth if we don't have more people. And Mainers know that more than anyone else, because we are the one of the oldest members of the union. And if we don't welcome people, we are going. It's because economic and survival is about numbers. So you either welcome people that will keep your state, your community, and your city running, or you are going to go down because of lack of people, and that will fill your healthcare, your truck drivers who deliver, how do we call the food that goes to, that will live. Maine is a rural farming, fishing community. If we don't have more people here who will pick up the job and do the work, we are going to have a lot of challenges, from meat packing to even STEM professionals, small businesses, immigrants of all kind, especially refugees that we welcome here, who are always willing to give back to the society that have given them so much, are the ones that keep our communities alive. Some of the allyship, I think what I have seen in the past month is how people, mainstream Mainers, white Mainers specifically, drop everything that they were doing to stand next to our immigrant communities. I have sat here at this same spot, like doing. People will call me and say, "Hey, do you know somebody who need a driver?" And then I'll look on my text message. Somebody needs to her kids to be sent to school, or somebody needs some grocery to be picked up for her, and that is what we did. Prior to that, we have um uh, the uh, the ICE hotline that community groups came together to create, and most of the people that will show up to stand next to a an asylum seeker or an immigrant, they are, most of them are white. They are using their whiteness as a shield between ICE and our community members. I think most of you have seen that video of a woman who was saying to the ICE guy, "You cannot take a video." She was taking a video of him, and he was taking a video of her, and he told, "I'm going to put you on the." That happened in Maine. So that is the type of people that we have as neighbors, and we are all grateful for that. And the rest of America can also learn from that, and we are here to share what we have learned with them. If they reach out to us, they reach out to the white folks here. They can share how and why they did what they have to do, and I know a lot of them. So anybody who reaches out to me, I can connect them to some white folks here.
Absolutely. Well,
Thank you,
we're
Fatima.
called the Absolutely. We're called the Vacation Land. So come on to Maine and we will have a big organizing community and learn. So this is, as we're getting to the last part of our program, I would like each one of you, and starting with Nicole, to talk about, we know what's happening to our communities. We know that this is not going to stop here. They're going to find new policies, new things. So where we go from here? What is the remedy? How do we survive at this moment or fight back?
Thank you, Fatima. It's a big question, but I think the first thing starts with us being in community with each other and building even bigger, more connected communities, being able to build out our movement in this time to oppose the authoritarian takeover of our government. I think we need to lean in to collectively holding our leaders in Congress accountable to really curb the damage that's being done by the enforcement regime. Right now, we have the opportunity to help hold the line so that not a single more dollar is given to ICE to continue its abuse of power and targeting of our communities that violate human rights, constitutions, legal protections, etc. We also have the opportunity to really push back against this idea of indefinite pausing of administration of immigrant benefits. We need to know why and how these are being paused and the justification, and really continue as a field to draw to question this idea of national security of formerly vetted people, and really kind of continually call that out as an untruth and as one of the main drivers of the false narratives around refugee constituencies. And then we need to organize. I think there is a role for our grassroots leaders to continue to advocate for safe pathways. We know we're not going to build a response to this alone or overnight. I think it's going to take a lot of leaders from every vantage point, whether you're directly impacted, you're an ally, you're a business person, you're coming to this as a local elected official, or even a state government office. There's a role for everybody to play in pushing back in this time. And really what we're talking about is naming our values as a collective group of people who believe in welcome, who believe in inclusion, who believe in an open society where migrants and refugees can be welcomed into the fabric of our nation. That is my call to action, and that is, I hope, what we build over the next 3 years.
Thank you, Nicole. Newell, again, what is your remedy? And I know that you're organizing an amazing group of faith leaders across the country, and we cannot wait to hear more.
Yes, thank you. I mean, actually, in this moment, I'm in the Washington, D.C. Methodist office, where our advocacy office is located out of, and we're preparing. We had planned for a couple hundred. We've been working closely with the United Methodists on this, and Bishop Minerva Carcano. We had planned for a couple hundred, and then, registration kept going up and up and up, and all of a sudden it was 1,200 people, which is the cap. We had to cap it for the permits for the Upper Senate Park across from the Capitol. And so we are, joining this movement. So many people want to be part of it. We are calling it Faithful Resistance for Immigrant Justice, a public witness, and we're calling out the lies, that continue to dehumanize and criminalize both immigrants and refugees, that is separating families, that is dismantling our humanitarian protection and legal immigration systems. And we know that this is more about this xenophobic white supremacist agenda. And we have to try to create some sort of moral clarity in this moment for people. So I think that type of event, and then people need to come when they do those type of events, they need to bring the organizing back to where they are and really educate their communities, collaborate alongside impacted leaders. And, we are seeing as I mentioned before, refugee and other those under other humanitarian protections, TPS and asylum, really coming together more And part of it is because of things like this new memo on February 18th that the administration now wants to try to arrest, detain, and potentially deport hundreds of thousands of people with refugee status, particularly if they don't have their green card and at that 1 year mark. So, that is, they're continuing to create more barriers for asylum seekers as well. And we're seeing congregations really step up when needed. All these things really fly in the face of what the 1980 Refugee Act is really supposed to be about, something that's been law of the land for over 45 years. So in these times, we're seeing the rise of authoritarianism, and that shining city of the hill that we all hoped we could be is fading, and we have to come back together to bring our movements, like we're doing on this very call, bring our movements together to focus on how it is that we can first resist the policies that are evil and are oppressive, and then build something new. What is it we need to claim? What is it that we want to see in the world? We want to see a world where everybody is treated with equity and dignity, and everybody has the types of basic needs that we all deserve. And how do we create a platform then around that? And how do we try to get the decision makers that will help us with that process? So there's a lot of work to do. And, I think another thing that I want to make sure we're thinking about is election protection, right? Because the midterms are coming up. And how do we make sure that our election system maintains its integrity when we know that it will be attacked? How do we make sure that people who are naturalized immigrants still have their right to vote, but that everybody has their right to vote? And those types of things are going to continue to be something we talk about more and increasingly important.
Thank you so much, Neil. Like, you talked about election protection, and recently I was reading an article and that was analyzing from Heritage Foundation, which is one of the most conservative foundations, who has been documenting any fraud that happened to our election. And they documented in the past, I think it was 20 years or so, there was only 10 frauds related to immigrant and refugees. Why Americans have voted for over 2 billion times. So when it comes to that, and going back to Pius, you're an elected official in a state like Maine. So what is the remedy for you, and where you're sitting? You're seeing what's happening to our communities. You're seeing that in a state like Maine, we need more immigrant and refugees coming. But at the same time, you're seeing, majority of the Muslim countries are on a visa ban. There is not a lot happening. It feels that we are in exile, even if we are in our own country. I'm talking about people who, like, I'm a naturalized American, but sometimes it feels like I am a citizen, but not an American, because of the rhetoric that keeps being told and told. So, and I want to feel like an American as we are getting ready for this election, and where we go from there to get to that point. Pais.
Well, thank you. The work that we are all doing, all of us on this screen and the attendees are all interconnected. And each of us have to play a role in whichever space we find ourselves. I have talked to faith leaders and invited them to spaces that I organize things, or some of us who are elected organize spaces, and then we invite everybody in the community. I think we need to organize. We need to talk to each other. We need to reach out to those who normally are not in our spaces and talk to them. And as I said earlier, we need to sharpen our conversation, let them know that immigrants are not just here to take, they also expand the opportunities that our country have to offer, because they fill in spaces that are not filled, or that we don't have the capacity to fill because of numbers. We need to talk about how helping refugees, how do we call it, succeed, helps the American communities succeed. I can give the story of Lewiston. Lewiston used to be a very distressed city, as we use in some languages. And then suddenly Somalians came, and Lewiston is a thriving city. When I moved to Portland 25 years ago, how do we call it? Portland is, I joke that it is a sleeping giant that have not realized who she was. And then suddenly we have immigrants coming. Of course, it is not only the immigrants who work to bring you to where we are. But when you open a grocery store, we add up to the people that will go and buy from that grocery store. When you open your hotel, we are the ones that work in the hotels. When you open hospitals, we are the ones that will clean the hospitals. We are the ones that are the doctors. And we are the ones that fill the pharmacy spots that you will have in those things. In our schools, anywhere, if you look at where there are a lot of concentration of immigrants, you will realize that schools were going to close. And then when we arrive, we bring those schools back to life. Right here in Portland, our schools is 55 or 56% BIPOC. When I moved here, Portland Public Schools was about 80% white, right? So we have trends here that shows that inviting immigrants and welcoming immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers do more. They may need help in the beginning, but in the long run, the host communities do benefit more than how do we call it? More than what refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants do benefit from them. In terms of the upcoming elections, what we need to do is we need to go out there and talk to our communities and spell out what, if they don't go out to vote, what it means. And I'm sure that based on what have happened in the past month, 2, 3, since some of us know what is going on, but it has been intensified and amplified in the past few months. And I'm sure that our members of our community and our allies have seen it. And we need to get them to go out and vote. It doesn't matter which party they are in. And I'm sure that they know who to vote for. I don't want to go too much into politics to cause problem for your 501c3 this thing, but let's do that. Let's talk to people. Let's get people, go to the churches, go to the community events, mosque, everywhere that we have people, whether they are immigrants or not. Talk to them, get them out to participate, because it is very important. Talk to your local elected officials, talk to state legislatures, and reach out to your congressional delegates. It is easy to talk to elected officials, especially those in DC who make all the big decisions. But also locally, your city council meetings, go to your school board meetings. If they see you in those spaces and you talk to them, maybe when they make some decisions, they know that there's somebody right sitting across the and that anytime they raise their hand, it impacts that person one way or the other. Thank you. And I'm going to send it back to you, Fatima.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. I see some of you are adding your names and your states. Thank you for joining from all over America and listening to us. And also, thank you for everyone who will be watching the recording of this. So this is the end of our Refugee Matter this time. If you want to have more conversation and listen to this kind of conversation, please go to our website or send a register for our serve list, and we will invite you to the next one. And as we say in Farsi, sometimes we have to go through midnight in order to see the light of the day. And I hope and I pray, this is Ramadan and also Lent, and I hope and I pray that this is our midnight and we will survive it and we will do it together. We will organize and mobilize together. And thank you so much for joining, and we will see you to the next Refugee Matter.